Chair Moss. Turn the time over to you for Finance Committee report and recommendations.
Thank you. Crept up on me. All right, we have 2 action items, so I think we'll probably be able to catch up a bit. Number 1, on the, let's see, 11.2, action on Rule 277-479, funding for charter school students with disabilities on an IEP. That's an amendment and continuation. Committee recommends that the board continues and approves R277479 Draft 2 on second and final reading.
Thank you. Seeing no lights, we have a motion on the floor that the board continues and approves R277-479 Draft 2 on second and final reading. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? That passes unanimously.
All right. Action item number 11.3 relates to corrective action letters. Excuse me, let me get corrective action letter. In the recommended action from committee, the committee moves that the Finance Committee recommends that the board directs staff to send a formal letter to the LEAs that have not submitted their audited financial statements and or not submitted accurate information to the UPEFS as of the March 2022 board meeting today, and that the letter places those LEAs on an immediate corrective action plan. This includes notifying them of the withholding of the LEA's allotment beginning with their March 2022 allotment and until the LEA has submitted their audited financial statements and those audited audited financial statements match or reconcile with previous submissions to the UPEFS.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor as stated. We'll go to board member questions and comments. Board member Klein.
Yes, I received some communication from Carolyn Charette at American Preparatory Academy, and she asked that I read so we can hear the full gamut of the situation before we vote on this. She says, our auditor, Squire and Company, experienced staffing challenges that resulted in them missing the December 31st statutory deadline for our financial statements. Our financial statements were submitted 1 week late on January 7th. This happened in spite of our efforts to ensure our timely responses to our auditor's requests and having a new accounting system which has streamlined our processes and made us significantly more efficient. The auditor issued the financial statements but did not issue the opinion letters or single audit results. The auditor's position is that the single audits must be completed in order to issue the opinions. The federal deadline for single audits has been extended to March 31st because of increased funds to audit with COVID grants, as well as due to COVID-related audit staffing issues. Our auditor indicates that our single audits and the opinion letters will be submitted by that deadline. APA has been in nearly constant communication with USBE staff and the state auditor's office over the past several months regarding this issue. The state auditor's office contacted our auditor recently to discuss our audit, and we appreciate them engaging in this issue. According to our auditor, on that call, the process was outlined as follows. There would be a corrective action initiated at the committee level at the March USBE meeting. The committee recommendation would go to the full board during the April meeting. Our auditor indicated that as the federal deadline is March 31st for the single audits and his opinions would be issued by then, by the time the corrective action is to be presented to the full board, it will have been resolved by our submission of the single audits and opinions. We received no notice Tuesday that the corrective action would go before the full board this month, prior to the new federal deadline and prior to being heard by the committee. The corrective action would go into effect immediately if USBE votes to impose it, and APA's March allotment will be withheld. We do not believe allotments should be withheld if the deadlines are met. We respectfully request that the originally agreed upon process is instituted, with corrective action being instituted after the federal deadline of March 31st for the single audits. Thank you for your service, Carolyn Charette.
Board Member Hymas, or sorry, Board Member Moss, your light's still on. Is that because you're presenting?
Well, I was going to ask Deputy Superintendent Jones to respond at some point.
Okay,
but
go ahead.
We could certainly wait for other
Nope,
comments.
Chair.
Those also might
Go ahead.
play into his response, so. We want to take other questions first and then have Deputy Jones answer everything?
Let's have Deputy Jones speak, and then I got a text from Board Member Belknap that her hand was up in the beginning, so I will allow her to speak after you, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. So, I mean, that was quite a Madam Chair, it was quite of a lengthy, response, I guess, from Director Charette to Board Member Klein. The only thing I would ask for clarity on is the statement that they weren't aware of the corrective action plan or the process. This has been, so obviously this has been coming from the process that we take with all of our LEAs. We hold them to the same standard. There were other LEAs that missed deadlines, and as you know, and then, we did send corrective action plans to them. So I'm just a little bit concerned that with that particular statement, right? Because obviously we're reporting this right now, or this action is being taken by the board at this point, and it's stemmed from the process that other LEAs were subject to, and APA was from Finance Committee as early as last month or as late as last month, and then even before that. So we've consistently reported all of the LEAs who are not compliant with reporting deadlines. The issue isn't the single audit itself. The issue is they're missing two components of their financial statements. It's the internal controls and the statement of compliance by the third-party auditor. Yes, we fully understand that the single audit is, but this is dragged on for that initial submission on those two components of the financial audit. And we understand, we recognize that it's subject to the third-party auditor providing those. However, there was other LEAs were in similar situations for different reasons. And, we addressed it, sent the letters out too. So the timing of this, I don't think is in question. We followed the process all the way through. In fact, we're actually probably 30 days late on these guys, on this particular entity or LEA, as opposed to, say, North St. Pete, which we sent them a corrective action plan and then they were able to submit it. So I'm not sure, I think of all the other pieces and parts, I concur. I've heard the same things that she reported, but I'm a little bit taken aback by, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it sounded to me like she's saying this is a surprise to them. If it is a surprise to them, I talked to the BA yesterday. He didn't seem surprised by it. He echoed the same sentiments, but clearly by virtue of the fact it was on the Finance Committee agenda even last month, this should be no surprise to anyone. So,
Thank you.
So I just asked for clarity on that. I'm not trying to argue or, do that, but I mean, that's the first time I heard that from her vantage point, from Director Charette's vantage point. So I'd have to seek some clarity on that aspect. But the process is pretty sound. It's applied to all LEAs. Now, if the board votes to take action on this, and I do send the letter that says, we're planning on withholding your funds, there's still technically an additional 20 days. If I sent the letter out tomorrow, which is March 11th, there's still another 20 days for them to become compliant. And I recognize that it's at the, with a relationship with the third-party auditor, but there's still additional time. And so right up to the last date in the month, we can, if they become compliant, say on March 30th, we could open the payments up to them for April. So again, we're just following the process that we've applied to all LEAs for compliance on reporting.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap, sorry I missed you when you had your hand up.
It's okay, Vice Chair. I actually have 3 quick questions. One, the letter alluded that there was a back deal. I want to know if there was some other deal made. Number 2, did the process change in any way for them or for any other school? And number three, are they unique? Is APA unique in this way than other schools who have struggled to get things done during the COVID?
Thank you, Vice Chair Belknap. I think you addressed a little bit of that, Deputy Superintendent Jones, but I think there was a middle piece that may not have been.
Well, so if I understood, Madam Chair, if I understood the first question, the term back deal, could we rehear that again? I don't know of anything of a back deal with us, or I don't know where the context of the term back deal is.
Maybe, Vice Chair?
Yes,
Maybe,
please.
Our letter or their letter?
Do you want me to
Maybe
reread it?
CAE Davis may have the answer to that, because it alluded that the audit committee did something.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Would you like me to reread that part?
I
Sure.
think,
Yeah, we could do that. Said that the state auditor's office contacted their auditor to discuss it. And according to their auditor, on the process was outlined as follows. There would be corrective action initiated in the committee level, at the March USBE meeting instead of the full board. The committee recommendation would go to the full board during the April meeting. Our auditor indicated that as the federal deadline is March 31st for the single audits, and his opinion would be issued by then, by the time the corrective action is to be presented to the full board, it will have been resolved by our submission of the single audits and opinions.
So the state auditor is not in this office. I'm not sure if that's a reference to the independent internal audit office that's here at the Utah State Board of Education, or the state auditor, Auditor Dougal.
As the state auditor contacted our auditor, so is that APA's auditor?
So I don't know that we can answer questions necessarily of communication that came from Auditor Dougal's office.
Well, APA has been in nearly constant communication with USBE staff and the state auditor's office over the past several months. And then she talked about the state auditor's office contacting their auditor.
Madam Chair,
Please.
can I just clarify?
Yes, please.
We keep using the term single audit, and Sam, stand up, please. The compliance issue is not related to the single audit. Am I right? Is he shaking his head north and south, or? Yes. So I don't understand why we're focused on the single audit. The single audit is not the compliance issue. The compliance issue is the reporting that's required of all of our LEAs for external audited financial statements. So let me give you an example. The single audit, the federal government said, we'll extend the deadline on the single audit. And then Sam confirmed this too, my understanding of this. The Office of the State Auditor sent out what they call an audit alert, and Debbie can jump in on this too. And they said, yes, we recognize that the single audit extension has been offered by the federal government, but we're mandating, or by way of the audit alert, the March 31st deadline. So the corrective action plan that is in front of you for action right now is not in any way, shape, or form related to the single audit. That's not the issue. The issue is that they haven't provided the statement of internal controls and the statement of state compliance that's an integral part of those, where other LEAs who are also subject to the single audit have done so. And they've done it on the right timeline. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear, or that we're not, because I want to make sure that we're being absolutely fair and equitable in our approaches and our applications to the standards and the reporting that we hold our LEAs to. This is not about their single audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hymas.
Yeah, I appreciate the context, and I just want to add a little more. I do want you to know, I will abstain from this vote, but I do want you to know that according to Squire and Company, it was improper for us to submit the opinions until after the single audits were done. So that could be a little bit of clarification there. Additionally, it wasn't a surprise. The penalty wasn't a surprise. The surprise was that the penalty would be before the federal deadline. So just a couple points of clarification on that note. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Jones, there were two matters that Board Member Hymas brought up. Could you address those two?
Yeah,
things?
and I was consulting with Sam. So to the first point, you know, I had talked to Squire several months ago, a couple of months ago. I would need to go back to Squire and ask them for clarity on that, because my understanding is that Squire also provides auditing services to other LEAs. They've provided those statements without, or not with the completed audit. So I would need to clarify based on this, what the input that you've just provided, or Madam Chair, the Board Member Hymas has provided. I would have to go back and clarify with them, why is it different? Or, you know, maybe, or perhaps they hadn't engaged with other LEAs. You know, we would check that and we'd see, you know, have you done this? Because as far as I know, they have engaged with other LEAs and they have met the timeline, even though they're still subject to single audits too. So
Okay.
what
you
we
ad-
would do is just real quickly, what
Yes,
we
go
would
ahead.
do is if we know the single audit deadline is March 31st, so then that creates a whole nother check of the system, right? So again, we're not trying to hold them to the single audit, but is Squire saying that because they're following that same application to their clients, even beyond APA? Or are they saying that because of whatever questions or concerns they may have, or perhaps they didn't have enough information from APA at the time to render a single audit and/or the financial statements at that time? So, you know, I would have to verify that. Does that answer Board Member Hymas's questions? I think I covered both in there, kind of.
I see a north-south nod. We're doing a lot of nodding in this meeting.
Okay, right, yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you both. Board Member Hanson, no, Chair Huntsman, you have your light on. Did you want to speak? Okay, Chair Huntsman is in line first. Oh, did you want to go back or your light's still on?
Whenever.
Okay,
So, here we are again, another year, and
Yes, that's true.
this comes up every year, it's a requirement. We're in this position of, there's two poor paymasters, one that pays too soon, one that doesn't pay at all. And we don't want to be a poor paymaster, but we have this compliance requirement. We have 178 LEAs of all sizes and capacities and everything else. We spent quite a bit of time in finance meeting on this. Brought it right out to attention. There's no discovery in this. There isn't a last minute, last second issue. That appears to be an emergency the last hour before this plays out. So every one of these LEAs that we talked about briefly in finance has been noticed of the concern, clear up till today. And so my question, Madam Chair, is if we can have staff answer this to speak, because it sounds like this letter had a tone of lack of communication or something. So my question would be to Deputy Superintendent Jones or staff, can you speak to the communications that have happened since our finance meeting to present to attempt to get this in, like 177 other LEAs were able to do to come into compliance? Can you speak to the communication? I don't know if you begged, pleaded,
Well,
what, I don't know.
yeah.
Can
Madam
somebody
Chair.
speak to that?
please.
So
Yes.
just real quickly, as I reported, for the record, I discussed the situation with the business administrator, Casey Krellin, just yesterday on the phone. Deborah Jacobson, our director, was with her. We seemed to have agreed that, yes, it's very concerning, and we understood. And I recognize the fact that they're waiting for their third-party auditor to do this. However, it seemed to me that he was very well aware of the action that we were going to take. He was very specific. Yes, there are ramifications if those reports aren't provided by March 31st and we don't fund on that, because they are a bondholder. They're part of the credit enhancement program. And his concern is my concern, is everyone's concern, and staff has talked to them. Mr. Krellin has been very good about updating us and trying to say, hey, this is where we're at. And he does it in close coordination and cooperation with Sam and Brett Balatzar, who's Sam's employee. Can we also add Sam into this for further documentation of just how much we've been working with APA? We're not trying to single them out or do anything. We're trying to apply the same set of standards to this LEA that we did others as well.
Director Yuri, can we get a quick, just summary of the communication that has transpired?
Yes, Dallin Pinier is the school finance specialist assigned directly to American Preparatory Academy. Each LEA has a school finance specialist assigned to them. He and Brett Baltazar, who's our school finance specialist manager, have emailed Casey Krellin at least weekly. Also followed up with phone calls and any other been available to answer communications. This is not a surprise. When UPEFs is submitted late, they ask why, offer help, offer guidance, offer assistance. When, as mentioned, the January 7th, the basic financial statements were submitted without the necessary reports on internal controls and state compliance. Again, specific reaching out, asking for assistance, asking for those sorts of things. And then when they go to reconcile, so there's two items here on the agenda memo. We do have those missing financial statements. We also do not have correct financial data that was reported to us in UPEFs, in the Utah Public Education Financial System. So we have two items here that have, and at every step, Dallin and Brett have communicated that clearly, offered help, offered assistance, and I can speak a.
And Madam Chair, if I can just further clarify that, just as of yesterday, in my discussion with Mr. Krellin, he called me, I called him back, Director Jacobson, or Assistant Superintendent Jacobson was on the line as well. He articulated to me that he's making every concerted effort to meet that other piece of noncompliance, which is to reconcile the UPIFs. And so we are supportive. We completely recognize that and said, great, tell us if there's anything else we can do for you. That gentleman is making a concerted effort to get to what right is with his reports. We're just at a point, though, where if I was an LEA that had already received a letter from Scott saying, hey, you're non-compliant, where is the same standard being applied? That's all this is. I mean, I do understand there's risks involved here. I do understand that, if their allotments aren't provided to them by the end of the month, we could potentially run into some, timeliness on the bond payments. The treasurer will be made aware of that. We collaborate and cross-coordinate this all the way to, and it's in the interest of the school and their documented and concerted effort to get to what right is. They do have to continue, though, to work with their third-party auditor. That's not something I can control. I can't, for the record, I did call them a couple of months ago, but we have to be respectful of the fact that they have a client and, CPA firm privilege, right? That they can't go into details with me, so, and I respect that, I do, so.
Thank you. Let's hear from
Point of clarification,
Yes.
just real quick. I just want to clarify again that the process and all of this that is happening, it was not a surprise.
Okay.
The surprise, if we're using that term, right? It's that sorry, my notes here.
that it came before the date.
That the it's not a punishment. Sorry, guys, taking too much time here.
Can we come back to you to clarify that, Board Member Hymas? Right after we hear from
Yeah.
CAE Davis?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. CAE Davis?
Sorry, I lost it.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Chief Audit Executive Debbie Davis. I just wanted to clarify regarding the audit opinions that are due. These are outlined in Board Rule R277479, and there's 3 items that we're talking about. There's lots of items listed in the board reporting table, the deadlines that are there, but specific to this conversation. So first and foremost, financial statements are due, and financial statements include both the opinion on the financial statements, and they also include, it's called, super long title here, Independent Auditors Report on Internal Control over Financial Reporting and on Compliance and Other Matters based on an audit of financial statements. So it's that second piece that's missing, and Sam and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's that second compliance report on internal controls that's missing. And it should be, you should be able to complete that because it's associated with the financial statements, has nothing to do with the single audit. And I did verify, I pulled up a couple of other LEAs to make sure that they have been able to submit that report, and they have, even the same CPA firm has submitted that report. The other report or opinion that's required is the state compliance audit opinion. And that is also due similarly, only related to the state. And the opinion there, and I'll read you the title, just scrolling to get there. The Independent Auditors Report on Compliance and Report on Internal Control over Compliance required by the State Compliance Audit Guide. So that is also missing, if I'm understanding correctly, Scott and Sam. So it sounds like those are the 2 items that are missing. The single audit is not due until later. So as stated, that is not relevant to this conversation. So I just wanted to confirm by way of circling back to board rule that those are the 2 reports that we are talking about. They should have been completed within the required deadline. They were completed for other LEAs. And completion of those reports is not contingent on completion of the single audit.
Thank
So
you.
that's all I had to say.
So Madam Chair, if I could expand on that. So thank you, Debbie. Debbie translated me very well. That's what I have been insisting on and stating, and not in any hostile or fashion. It's a standard process. And so Squire has obviously, to Debbie's point, done this for other entities. So I don't know why. I do not know why they haven't done it for APA. I don't. And so I can't say, all I know is we don't have them. We have them for other LEAs. They met the timelines, but we do not have them for APA. And that's all I'm doing, is what I'm just following the process and the standard.
Thank you. Board Member Hymas, are you ready to clarify?
Yeah, and I apologize.
It's all right.
Yeah, and to be honest, APA does not know why either, but again, the surprise was the penalty was before the federal deadline. That's where it was like, okay, wait a second, we know we're out of compliance here, or we know we're late. We accept that, we've been pushing back and forth. So that's what I'm trying to clarify, is that this incident wasn't a surprise. I mean, every LEA knows that this is coming, right? They know the deadlines. The surprise is we're pushing before the March 31st deadline.
Thank
Chair,
you.
if I
And
may?
just to clarify,
Yeah.
if I understood what you said, there would still be a 20-day opportunity.
Okay.
So the penalty wouldn't come until the deadline, is that?
Yeah, and
Correct.
I might need Debbie to help me translate this, but I have to be absolutely clear. This is not about the federal deadline. It's not. It has absolutely nothing to do with the federal deadline. So the federal deadline is March 31st, and everybody will be held to standard on that. This is about not providing the elements that were described to you by both me and Chief Audit Executive Director. Has nothing to do with the federal deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Moss.
Thank you. Just another further point of clarification. There was some concern expressed about whether the process within our board was followed, and an understanding that there would be a corrective action at the committee level in March, followed by going to the full board during the April meeting. So I just want to clarify, that committee is the Finance Committee. We heard this in February 4th, and we approved this in that committee a month ago for presentation to the full board now. So that process has been in the works. We had a deep dive with Deputy Superintendent Jones with others on the points of clarification they've provided here. So just want to put that on the record. It's been out there for a month, and I understand that Deputy Jones has been speaking with them. I think he's sympathetic, as was the Finance Committee, that there are third parties engaged in this process sometimes, and yet the process that's been followed, we had, I think, 3 or 4 others on the list at one point.
Yes.
And the recommendation was that if any of those were on, that would go to the full board. The others have fallen off. So I think our staff have been working and trying to get this done, appreciative of the challenges that the school faces in working with a third party. But I think it's been done according to the appropriate process and brought to this board after a lot of communication.
Thank you. Board Member Hanson. Sorry.
Sorry, am I up? Sorry.
You're up.
Had a slight disturbance.
It's been so
here with
long
my
since you
next
put your
door
light
neighbor.
on.
I know it, the light was burning out over here. No, I think we do have a motion before the board, is that correct? The motion made by Chair Moss. I'd just like to state that this appears to have been properly noticed. It appears there was an opportunity for interested people to speak in the committee meeting. It appears that there is no compliance now, a month after the committee meeting, and it appears that this is being evenly applied. So I'll call the question. I think we need to vote.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. What is it called? It's not called question. And I believe it's non-debatable. Is that correct? So all those in favor of ending, what is it
Ending
actually
in
called?
debate.
No, calling the previous question. All those in favor of calling the previous question, please say aye. Those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, there's a motion on the table that the board directs staff to send a formal letter to the LEAs that have not submitted their audited financial statements and/or not submitted accurate information to the Utah Public Education financial system as of the March 2022 board meeting, and that the letter places those LEAs on an immediate corrective action plan. This includes notifying them of the withholding of the LEA's allotment, beginning with their March 2022 allotment and until the LEA, I'm missing my next page. Until the LEA has submitted their audited financial statements and those audited financial statements match or reconcile with previous submissions to the UPEFS. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes with one abstention, with Board Member Hymas abstain. Chair Moss? Oh,
Can,
do you need it?
can I take some executive privilege right here? I don't know where I got 178 in my brain, but we actually have on this submission here 156 LEAs, so we have 155 submissions. I don't know where the 170, how it gets in my head, but
I know
there's
where, 'cause
156, so
there's a
I wanted to
different-
be correct, and I was wrong, and I
I
fixed
know
it.
where you got it, because they're
Sorry.
defined differently federally and state, and one's 178 and one's the other. Let's go back to Chair Moss.
We also had a great discussion about the transition from FASB to GASB, but lucky for you, it was an information item, so we're done.
Thank you. All right, that's it for the Finance Committee then.